Hello everyone, this is Chandani Casey. I am from the School of Art, Architecture and Design at the University of South Australia. Today I'm going to give a presentation titled Cultural Heritage Conservation of Kathmandu Valley, a Stakeholder Perspective. So just to start off, I'm going to briefly talk about heritage and living heritage. So heritage is of increasing significance to each and every society. It can evoke a sense of continuity of culture and allow society to make sense of the present. Heritage is now no longer limited to just built fabric, but also incorporates life of contemporary resident community. There is a living dimension to heritage, which is now being recognized as living heritage. Living heritage is not just about monuments, places, and objects, but also about intangible heritage like customs, rituals, processions, and festivals. It is about communities and continuity of traditions and practices. So rapid urbanization and growth of cities all over the world is affecting our heritage. And similar is the case in developing countries, where rapid growth of cities in the developing countries has led to the transformation of spatial pattern of land uses and demolition of the traditional structures for high-rise development. Similar is the case in Kathmandu Valley, where unplanned urban development has led to the expansion of the core, urban sprawl, loss of open spaces, decreased livability, and rise of concrete structures away from the traditional brick structures. It has also led to the destruction of urban heritage and conversion of the traditional settlement pattern and activities. This paper discusses the stakeholder perspective on cultural heritage conservation of the valley. This is done to improve strategies and policies on planning and conservation of living heritage and to ultimately develop an approach for the planning of living heritage of Kathmandu Valley. A case study approach was deemed appropriate for this research as it allowed data to be collected from a combination of methods and from multiple sources. So for this research, I have used four different methods for data collection. Firstly, the questionnaire surveys, then interview with the stakeholders, observation surveys, and cultural mapping. For this paper, I'm going to talk about the interview with the 19 respondents, four different groups of respondents active in the heritage conservation of Kathmandu values were interviewed, namely the academicians and consultants, local government authorities, central government authorities, and local community leaders. Interviews were undertaken between March to June 2016, and that was exactly a year after the earthquake. Interviews were conducted in Nepali language and audio recorded, and later it was translated to English for analysis. The interview data was organized, coded, and analyzed in NVivo. Content analysis was used to analyze the collected data. As mentioned before, Kathmandu has been used as a case study site. Kathmandu Valley is the administrative, economic, and political center of Nepal. It is one of the fastest growing urban areas in South Asia. The valley contains one of the oldest human settlements in central Himalayas. The rich history can be traced in the city cores, as seen in the arrangement of buildings, monuments, streets, and public open spaces. There is a spatial link between private and public spaces with a gradual path leading from the public street to the semi-private area and into the inner courtyards of private residences. There are numerous temples, shrines, dance platforms, wells, and rest houses in the squares and streets. The inner courtyards were mainly used for daily activities, festivals, and also used as refuge during an earthquake. The picture on the bottom right hand corner is one of the such wells or hittis in the in the squares of the core area. Layers of evolving traditional settlement patterns and rich built heritage, along with the people that define them, give Kathmandu a unique sense of place. Heritage of Kathmandu is linked to the structures, functions, and activities associated with it that dramatically change the meaning of the place. Newar people are the focus of living heritage of Kathmandu, as their social structure is unique with the coexistence of Hinduism and Buddhism. There is a strong social tie amongst Newar communities in all the cities of the valley due to the guttis. All the community works and activities are organized in the form of guttis. Gutis are social-religious organizations that are responsible for the upkeep of monasteries, temples, and shrines. This is done through the administration of proceeds from lands granted as endowments to certain deities and their temples or shrines. A Guti corporation was established in 1964 to consolidate all Gutis to a central unit and to preserve the tangible and intangible heritage. However, this affected the ancient management system and will of the community to preserve their temples, monuments, and rest houses. This consolidation of Gutis into one central unit did not work and kind of has affected the conservation of heritage. Four main themes were identified from the interviews, which were cultural heritage conservation, development and planning, urban quality, and heritage and natural disaster. This paper talks about only the cultural heritage conservation theme. Four sub-themes were also identified within the cultural heritage conservation, which were conservation process, cultural heritage type, conservation issues, and regulation and policy. Just to start off, I'm going to talk about the conservation process sub-theme. A conservation process in Kathmandu Valley involves two main actors, namely the government and community. Government authorities include different levels, such as local and central government. There are different organizations for heritage conservation in the valley, namely Department of Archaeology, local municipalities, ward offices, and Guti Sastan. All of these organizations fall under different ministries, and as identified by all the respondents, there is an overlap of work done by these organizations because they fall under different ministries. Conservation process has also been difficult due to the lack of involvement of government authorities. Heritage has not been a priority of the government authorities, and even if it has been a priority, only the tangible heritage is discussed or talked about in the discussion on cultural heritage. Intangible heritage has been left out of all these discussions. Another key actor for conservation of heritage in Kathmandu Valley is the community. Communities in Kathmandu Valley are bearer of both tangible and intangible heritage. Government do not seem to involve them in the planning of the site and conservation of heritage. Also, all the respondents identified that there should be a distinction between the core community and the other community members when we talk about involving them in this planning of living heritage site, as core community is the one that created the heritage and have been using it for centuries. So this core community lives within the site. They are the one that created the heritage and have continued over the centuries and continue to do so while adapting to change. So the second sub-theme was the cultural heritage type. As I mentioned before in my first slide as well, cultural heritage sites in Kathmandu Valley is a living heritage. So you have the tangible, which is the monument, places, and object, but also you have the intangible, which are like the customs, rituals, procession, and festivals. There is this interdependence of tangible and intangible heritage in the site. These intangible heritage are the ones that give Kathmandu its identity, because numerous festival, rituals, and procession takes place all year round in the site. The importance of intangible heritage was further emphasized after the earthquake, when the community involved in the processions and festivals further highlighted the importance of intangible heritage, as seen in the Indra Jatra, one of the major festivals of Kathmandu Valley. The third sub-theme identified from the interview is the conservation issues. There are many conservation issues in the valley. First is the migration of the core community from the core to the suburbs. Niwar community is the core community of Kathmandu Valley, and in the past few years, their migration from the core to the suburb is affecting the customs, rituals, some of the daily activities and festivals. The second conservation issue is the lack of awareness amongst the community members about the importance of their heritage. So the community know and use these heritage sites, but they do not understand the importance of it. The third issue is the very definition of heritage. One of the academicians noted that we tend to define heritage as something from the past that needs to be kept intact and give it to future generation. The very definition is not correct, as the present community has the right to create heritage. So the present community is not just a medium to transfer the heritage from the past to the future generation. They also have the right to create heritage. So the present time has to be reflected in our definition of heritage. Finally, the fourth issue is the consolidation of Gutis into a Guti Sansthan. Because of this consolidation, the ancient conservation management system is no longer working, and the Guti Sansthan is not able to manage the land owned by the Gutis or use the revenues generated through the land for the conservation of heritage. So this in turn is affecting the conservation of heritage. The fourth theme identified from the interviews was the regulation and policy. The principal act relevant to the conservation, protection and management of cultural property is the Ancient Monument Preservation Act and its subsequent amendments. The act was formulated from an archaeological perspective, and the focus is only on ancient monuments. The act does not take into consideration consultation with the local inhabitants and stakeholder collaboration. Another act that influences heritage conservation work is the Local Self-Governance Act. This act gives the elected local government bodies the function and duty to record, maintain and preserve the heritage within the area of jurisdiction. There is a lack of clear differentiation between the work that is done by Department of Archaeology through the Ancient Monument Preservation Act and local government authority through Local Self-Governance Act, which is causing issues with the conservation of heritage in Kathmandu Valley. Kathmandu Valley needs a policy that addresses both the planning and conservation of living heritage. Implementation of acts and regulation has been a major issue for the conservation of heritage. Almost all of the respondents mentioned this as a major issue because there are acts and regulation in place, but none of them are being implemented at this moment. Finally, current acts and regulation lack community participation. So as mentioned above, there are acts and regulation, but none of them addresses community participation. So from the analysis of the interviews, we can see that all the stakeholders have a good understanding of culture heritage, and they have raised issues related to culture heritage conservation and planning of a living heritage site. However, they agreed that there needs to be more involvement of government authorities in the conservation of heritage and planning of the site. The interview also brought out that participation and involvement of community members, especially the core community, is required to ensure the conservation and planning of living heritage. Lack of enforcement of bylaws and implementation of acts and regulations was considered an issue for the conservation of heritage. Intangible heritage such as the numerous festivals, processions and cultural activities was considered an identity of the site. In Kathmandu, there needs to be a shift from an expert-driven approach to a community-driven approach. And in the end, all these challenges should be addressed to facilitate effective conservation of heritage in the Kathmandu Valley. And this brings us to the end of my presentation. Thank you.